So let me paint you a picture. It's Sunday night. You've got something due Monday. Could be a report, an email, a project, whatever. You've known about it for a week, and you've spent most of that week not doing it. Instead, you cleaned your bathroom, you reorganized your desk, you watched 3 documentaries about deep-sea creatures. And now it's 10 p.m. and the panic sets in. Sound familiar? Here's what most people think is happening in that scenario. I'm just lazy. I lack discipline. I need better time management. But researchers at institutions like Carleton University and the University of Sheffield have been studying procrastination for decades now. And what they've found completely flips that story on its head. Procrastination isn't a time management problem. It's an emotion regulation problem. Let me say that again, because it's kind of a big deal. When you procrastinate, you're not failing to manage your schedule. You're trying to manage how you feel. Specifically, you're trying to escape a negative emotion, whether that's anxiety, self-doubt, boredom, frustration, or just that vague sense of dread that some tasks carry with them. The task feels bad, so your brain does what it's wired to do. It moves away from the thing that feels bad and towards something, anything, that feels a little better. Cleaning, scrolling, deep-sea creature documentaries. And here's the cruel twist. It works, at least temporarily. You feel genuine relief when you avoid the task. Your brain registers that relief as a reward. And then, just like any reward-seeking behavior, it wants to do it again. So if avoiding work literally makes you feel better in the moment, why would your brain ever stop doing it? The answer is, it won't. Not on its own. Not without understanding what's really driving it. Now here's where most productivity advice goes completely off the rails. The standard advice is basically, feel bad about procrastinating, use willpower to override it, and just start. And I get it. That sounds logical. It sounds disciplined. But it misses something critical about how the brain actually works. When you feel anxiety or dread about a task and you try to force yourself through it using shame or sheer willpower, you're essentially linking that negative emotion even more strongly to the task. You're training your brain to associate the work itself with pain and conflict. And brains are very, very good at avoiding pain. So what happens? The next time that task comes up, your brain's alarm system goes off even louder. The avoidance urge is even stronger. You've accidentally made the problem worse by fighting it the wrong way. There's actually a term psychologists use for this: ironic process theory. The more you try to suppress a thought or force yourself not to feel something, the more intensely you feel it. Tell yourself, don't think about procrastinating, and suddenly it's all you can think about. This is why the just be more disciplined crowd never quite gets to the root of it. The people who seem the most productive, the ones who consistently get things done without the Sunday night panic spiral, they're not fighting their brain. They've stopped arguing with it entirely. And that's where the actual solution lives. Okay, so here's the part I promised you. The shift that sounds too small to matter, right up until it does. It comes from a concept in psychology called self-compassion. And before you roll your eyes at that, stick with me for a second, because this is backed by some genuinely interesting research. A study published in the journal Self and Identity by Kristen Neff and Michael Hall found that students who forgave themselves for procrastinating on their first exam were significantly less likely to procrastinate on their second exam. Let that sink in. Forgiving yourself for procrastinating made them less likely to do it again. That is the opposite of what most of us assume. We think beating ourselves up is the motivator. We think the shame spiral creates accountability. But the data says no. Self-criticism increases procrastination. Self-compassion decreases it. Here's the psychological reason why. When you shame yourself for avoiding a task, you feel even worse about yourself and the task. Now the work is associated with both the original dread and the added layer of self-judgment. Of course you don't want to go near it. But when you acknowledge the procrastination without catastrophizing it, "Yeah, I avoided that, that's human, let's move on," you actually lower the emotional stakes of starting. The task becomes less threatening, and suddenly, it's just a task. Think about the last time you procrastinated on something. Did the guilt make you more productive? Or did it just make you feel worse while you kept not doing the thing? All right, so now we've got the foundation. Let's talk about what you can actually do with this. Because understanding the emotion regulation piece is great, but you still need some practical handles to grab onto when you're staring at something you really don't want to start. Tool number 1, name the feeling. Sounds stupidly simple, but there's solid neuroscience behind it, a process called affect labeling. When you consciously name an emotion, "I feel anxious about this," "This feels overwhelming," "I'm bored just thinking about this," it activates your prefrontal cortex and actually reduces the intensity of the emotional response in your amygdala. You're literally calming down your brain's alarm system by just saying what you feel out loud, or even just thinking it clearly. "I'm avoiding this because it feels intimidating." That's it. That small act of acknowledgement changes the equation. Tool number 2, shrink the task until starting feels ridiculous to avoid. Not the whole thing, not even a meaningful chunk of it. Just the smallest possible action that counts as beginning. Open the document. Write one sentence. Send one email. Spend 2 minutes on it. The psychological barrier here is almost entirely about starting, not doing. Once you're in motion, the emotional resistance drops dramatically. Researchers call this the Zeigarnik effect. Your brain actually becomes invested in finishing things once it started them. But you have to start. The 2-minute rule isn't about getting the work done in 2 minutes. It's about tricking your brain's threat detection system into standing down. You're not committing to the task, you're just looking at it for a second. Remember how avoiding the task gives your brain a reward signal? Starting, even for just 2 minutes, interrupts that loop before it can complete. Tool number 3, design your environment, not your motivation. Motivation is unreliable. Emotion regulation is hard. So stop depending on either of them being perfect, and instead make starting the default, easy option. Close the tabs that tempt you before you sit down. Put your phone in another room. Not face down, another room. Work in a space that your brain associates with focus. These aren't just nice tips. They're reducing the moment-to-moment friction that your avoidance instinct exploits. The less decision-making energy it takes to start, the less emotional resistance can fill that gap. And the fourth tool, which ties it all together, compassionate accountability. This means checking in with yourself about procrastination the same way a good friend would. Not, "You're such a failure for not starting this," but, "Hey, you've been avoiding this for a few days. What's actually making it hard? Let's figure that out." Sometimes you'll find the real blocker. Maybe you're not clear on what you're supposed to do first. Maybe you're afraid the result will be bad. Maybe you're genuinely burned out and need rest, not more hustle. That honest, kind conversation with yourself produces more actual action than any amount of shame or self-punishment. Every time. So let's zoom out for a second and look at the full picture. Procrastination is not a character flaw. It's not laziness. It's not a failure of discipline. It's an emotional response, your brain doing what it's wired to do, trying to protect you from discomfort. The reason most advice fails is that it tries to fight that response with force. More willpower, more shame, more just push through it. And that works occasionally, for some people, in the short term, but it's swimming against the current. What actually works is working with the way your brain functions. Naming what you're feeling to reduce its power. Making the first step so small that resistance doesn't have time to build. Setting up an environment that removes the easy escape routes. And treating yourself with the same patience you'd give a friend. Not because it feels good, but because it actually produces better results. The science is unambiguous on that last point. Shame doesn't motivate. Compassion does. Here's how I think about it. Your brain is not your enemy when you procrastinate. It's a scared kid who's trying to avoid something painful. Yelling at a scared kid doesn't make them brave. Helping them take one small step does. That's the shift. That's the whole thing. And yeah, it does sound almost too simple. I know. But simple doesn't mean easy, and it definitely doesn't mean you knew it already. Most people spend years stuck in the shame, avoid shame cycle without ever questioning whether the shame is actually helping. Now you know it isn't. And you have something better to replace it with. Before you close this video, I want to give you one thing to actually do. Think of the task you've been avoiding longest, the one that sits in the back of your mind. And instead of adding it to a to-do list, or setting a timer, or promising yourself you'll finally deal with it, just ask yourself one question. What feels bad about starting this? That's it. Just name the emotion. Don't solve it yet. Don't push through it. Just see it clearly. Because once you can see what's actually driving the avoidance, you're already halfway out of it. And hey, if this kind of thing interests you, the intersection of psychology and actually living better, this channel is basically built for you. I put out videos like this regularly, stuff that's grounded in real research but actually useful in your real life. So if you're not subscribed yet, the button is right there, and it genuinely helps the channel keep going. Either way, thanks for watching all the way to the end. That's not nothing. I'll see you in the next one.